platform as a service, and I'll draw it a little bit bigger so we can include a number of things. Within PaaS, we're going to be talking about the way that it interacts with a number of things. The first thing is it's got to have ways to dynamically interact with the infrastructure. Be able to request that virtual machine if we're dealing with an environment that serves up virtual machines, or just bare metal servers and storage and the underlying network resources. So it's got to be able to talk to the infrastructure, and it's going to do that through APIs. Okay, so one of the really important things as we start to move up the stack for cloud computing is more and more of this type of communication, between the layers, between different devices, this type of communication is going to be done through what are called APIs, or application programmer interfaces. This is in essence a programmable way for one area of a stack, one layer of communication, one layer of an application to talk down to different devices in a way that doesn't have to involve individual people, individual humans. It's not a scripting language, but it's a set of programmatic calls between computing devices that allow them to interact sort of natively. Okay, so the first thing a PaaS has to be able to do is deal with the infrastructure. Just like an operating system has to be able to deal with CPU and memory and I/O, PaaS has to be able to deal with the underlying infrastructure. The next thing a PaaS has to be able to do is it has to be able to say, well, what's sort of the framework for the application? So up here somewhere, I've got applications that are going to reside in this stack. Okay, and those applications want to be able to speak or be developed and speak their native languages. So .NET might be one of them for Windows, Microsoft environments. Java is a very popular one. Ruby might be one. Perl or Python might be one. Python. So there's a lot of different sort of frameworks, and again, these are programming languages and programming models that the PaaS has to be able to deal with. And again, these are sort of frameworks, and then to a certain extent, there's sort of this programmatic way that these are going to interact with each other. Okay, and again, we're talking about a sort of a different layer in the stack. We're talking about very programmatic types of things. We're talking sort of programmer language here as opposed to infrastructure language. We're not talking about networks and ports and disks and RAID. We're talking about programming languages and APIs and so forth. And then there's the things that the PaaS has to be able to do that's sort of its guts, its middleware, if you will. That being able to deal with, how do I make sure that multiple customers can carve off resources? So this might be customer A and customer B and customer C, but also that different environments can go and get resources. So a set of resources that are going to be CPU resources, or they're going to be certain types of processes that they can run for a period of time, development, application processes, they could run for a period of time and then stop them and start them and spin up more processes as needed depending on the load of the application. So a web process, an Apache process, some other type of set of processes. So there's both a containerization function for a certain process or for a certain customer that has to happen within a PaaS environment. And then there's also this sort of process interaction between this process and that process to make sure that if this one behaves badly or this one behaves the way it's supposed to, that the errors and the fallback and the resetting and all those sort of things that have to happen for an application that an operating system would traditionally have done in a traditional computing environment, all those things can be done in my PaaS environment, right? So the really important thing again as we talk about PaaS is there's a bunch of characteristics that we're thinking about. First and foremost, we're probably talking about new applications. Most people aren't going to take a legacy application that was written 10 years ago and try and wedge it into a PaaS environment. We're really talking about new applications. We tend to talk about web scale applications, web applications, things for mobile devices tend to be a really good candidate for PaaS. Anything that's probably going to be new, right? Great candidate for a PaaS environment. The next thing we tend to look at for PaaS environments, so we're going to probably have new applications. That tends to be the starting point. I'm going to write to a new application. I'm going to figure out what sort of language or framework that I want to write to. So this is sort of the language of the developers. Okay, it's Java, it's Ruby, it's whatever it is. Okay, Scala, whatever the latest language that they want to write in, okay? They want to know, is this open source or is this closed source? And there's benefits to both, right? Some application paths frameworks are open source, things like Cloud Foundry. Others are more closed in what they do, but ultimately they both have ways to have these APIs be able to access what happens within the paths. So in some cases, organizations want to strictly work with open source. Others are okay with more closed environments that have, you know, more direct support models. But as long as they can get to the application framework the way they want to, they can manipulate it and change it the way they want to, that tends to be that next big critical environment, big thing. The third thing is, can I run this in public or private environments? And some of these paths will run in only public. Others have been architected so that they can eventually run in private, even if they don't do it today. But really the big thing that people tend to look for when they look at PaaS platforms is, will I have portability between this cloud, which might be public and runs with Amazon or Rackspace or GoGrid, and will I be able to move that someday, if need be, to another cloud or a third cloud, or be able to run the application in all three clouds at the same time. So for geographic reasons, for cost reasons, for scalability reasons, they may want portability. So that's a really big deal. And then the last thing that people tend to look at is, so we've got, you know, is the application new? What's it for? Which language? Open source or closed source? Public or private? And the last thing tends to be, you know, are there other dependencies that I'm looking for with my PaaS? What kind of support do I get?